Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Uh, Usually I drop a what makes this game great on the weekends, but today I thought I'd have a bit of a discussion because something came up this week and it was just sort of out of the blue that it came up. And it is an interesting industry. It's a very dynamic industry when you look at it. And I'm a guy who likes to look at the business side of things too. I used to work in the oil industry. Now I work in the IT industry, although I'm not in gaming at all. I do work for the IT industry. And that's a very dynamic industry as well. But I find gaming is even more dynamic than the IT industry, and part of that's because it's an entertainment and it's not a necessity. It doesn't seep into every part and aspect of our lives. I happened upon an article this week. We're just going through the internet, and it was about Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard, and basically that it's the biggest takeover in video game history. So I did a little more research, and I started looking into things and reading other articles, and it was really troubling to me because it seems like the big players, the big console makers, at least Xbox, Microsoft, and Sony, seem to be buying up quite a few studios. Um, and some of them I knew about, but some of them I wasn't aware of, and I didn't know it was to the extent that it is. And I'm going to get into why this is troubling and why this is bad for the industry and bad for us gamers, people who like to play games. So I started looking into it, and of course, I found an old article where Microsoft purchased Bethesda and ZeniMax Studios and all their franchises and intellectual properties, and basically pulled in under Microsoft. So Microsoft seems to be taking the approach that let's go out and buy the biggest players we can, and that's hence you get Activision, you get Bethesda, those two big studios that Xbox seems to have pulled into itself. Now I know that regulators are still looking at that, but really I feel at the end of the day it's going to happen, and whatever Microsoft has to trade off with them, it's going to happen. And let's face it, corporations do this all the time, and they'll trade off stuff. They'll say they'll do stuff, but there's no regulation afterwards. So at the end of the day, Microsoft will do whatever Microsoft wants to do with Activision Blizzard. And so they'll own the Call of Duty franchise, which is a big franchise in gaming, and they'll own, the franchise I play a lot. I play Overwatch 2 a lot, and we'll see if those go exclusively to Xbox instead of being on PlayStation and Xbox. Um, the other side of the coin, though, is Sony, and I was surprised to see how many studios Sony has bought. Now, I knew about Naughty Dog. Most people knew about Naughty Dog, and about like Ben Studios. I heard about that one, and Insomniac Games, etc. But I went and I got a list of them, and I researched this, and I found 17 examples where Sony bought another studio. It's really actually kind of crazy when you think about it. 17 studios Sony has folded under. Now, these are smaller studios, obviously, than Activision or Bethesda, but it's a lot of them. Now, so you're probably wondering, well, what the hell? What the hell does this matter? These studios are still putting out games, they're still putting out good games, and they're still operating under their same name. Um, but I'm going to tell you why it matters. It matters a lot. We saw this with Disney. Disney bought Fox. Disney bought Lucasfilms, and then now all of a sudden Disney owns Marvel and Fox and Lucasfilms, so Star Wars and all the Fox franchises. And look at what they're doing to the movies. They've created a formulaic system of this is the movie you're allowed to create: director, producer, actors, screenwriters. And they've created this system that people like these movies, but let's face it, they're not artistically driven. They don't take chances. They're marketing driven. They've done the research. They know what people will pay to go see in the theaters or will pay afterwards to see on streaming. A lot of people say, well, that's not a big deal because they've done the research and they know what I like. But sometimes, let's face it, we don't know what we like. And I'm wondering if a movie like, if a studio like Disney would take the chance on The Godfather today, one of the greatest movies ever made. I'm wondering if they would take a chance on The Exorcist if this was within, these weren't already done. I know an Exorcist remake is coming out, or a reboot or remake, whatever, is coming out later this year. But would they make it now, today, if there wasn't one made way back in 1970 or whenever the original one was made? And I wonder about this with games. So, are we going to lose the artistic part of games, the risk-taking part of games? So if you go back a couple generations to PlayStation 2, PlayStation 2 had an immense library, massive library, mainly because it had a massive install base. So all the third-party developers in the world wanted to make games for PlayStation 2. So you had a lot of games, but you had a lot of choice in the games, the types of games, the gameplay. Even within genres, you had subgenres. You had new and innovative ideas for all these things. And really, would we get that today? Would we get that, or will we get that, once all these studios become more of a let's make money situation? Here's the formula. Here's the game you're allowed to make. Just make it within these confines. And I'm really dreading that. I'm really dreading that idea. And we are already seeing that. We're already seeing that in remakes. So a lot of the AAA studios are doing remakes now, and a remake is almost like a certain thing. And don't get me wrong, I loved the remakes for Resident Evil. I thought they were great. Love them. I'm hoping that I love the remake for Silent Hill 2. And I'll probably like and maybe even love the remake for Metal Gear Solid 3. But these aren't new franchises. These are sure bets. These guys are going, okay, well, let's remake a game that already has an audience, that we've already done our marketing. We've already built that audience. We already know that a certain percentage of that audience is going to go out and buy the remake of the game. And they're going to help spread the news that you should play this to a whole new group of people that, may not have played the game before because they were too young or not even born yet. My stepson, for instance, he wasn't even born when some of these games came out that they're remaking, and he plays the remakes, mainly because I play them and I say, hey, these are great. They're good games. They are. But it's not innovative. It's not creative. It's not breaking new ground anywhere. We're not getting games that maybe we would love. But my point is, these games aren't going to get remade or aren't going to get made. New games and innovative games aren't going to get made as much if the gaming industry continues down the road of consolidation, and eventually the suits in the boardrooms get their hooks on what goes as far as creativity and what you're allowed to put in your game. And these are the things that have to happen in the story. These are the things that have to happen in the gameplay. These are the things that have to happen in whatever aspect of the game that they touch. The cinematics of the game, the locations of the game. They're going to give you these parameters and say, write these games because we know from our marketing research that people will like them. Okay. And once again, that's fine. People will like them. People will buy them. But we're not going to get those games anymore that we don't know that we want. Those things that somebody creates out of their own mind because they happen to be a creative genius, and they put it into a game and they make it so good that we all love it. So there is a silver lining in this, though. So it seems like as these studios get sucked up by Sony and Microsoft, and they seem to be the biggest culprits of this, there's a vacuum that's being created, and that vacuum, that void, is being filled by indie game studios or independent game makers, individual people who make video games. Maybe they're living in their parents' basement. Maybe they've got a day job and at night they just go home and program. But they're making some really cool games, and they are stretching those ideas out. But they don't have the marketing power that the big studios have. They don't have the name recognition that the studios have with their franchises. Maybe we should be supporting and looking to those indie creators and trying to support them more to rebuild a diverse, competitive gaming market. Maybe that would be helpful. I think it would, because quite frankly, I'm scared of the day when, my game choices are limited to, you know, 500, 500 different games, but there's only like 6 real game types left, and all the games are fitting into those 6 types. And it just becomes a matter of, who does the best graphics, or who does the best smooth gameplay, or whose load times are better. I love video games, and I love the diversity in video games. I love the storytelling aspect of video games, and I think we're going to miss a lot of that if this consolidation continues to happen. Now, you do have some big studios still around. Capcom, Konami, I mentioned both of those with the remakes. Unfortunately, that's where they're going with this, is they seem to be doing more remakes and less risk taking. But I can see why they're around, because Microsoft's not going to snatch them up because in Japan, it's very difficult for a foreigner to do business the way somebody in Japan can do business. In other words, the Japanese would be very hesitant to sell their company to Microsoft, whether that's Capcom or Konami. And there's actual laws around that foreign ownership as well, properties and such. Makes it very hard for Microsoft. And that's probably why Sony hasn't made a move on either of those two, because they know that, hey, we don't need to make a move on them. They'll still make games for us because Microsoft is not going to snatch them up. So anyway, this is something to consider, and this is something to think about. But I'm going to make a little bit of a pledge here on my channel, and I'm going to actually try to cover some more independent games and independent creators. And I think that'll be good. Give them a little bit of a boost. I love AAA titles, and I do the, hey, what makes this game great? That's my flagship series, and I'm picking the best games I can, and the best games that I can find, the ones that I love the most when I played them the very first time or the 10th time. So I do love AAA titles, but I am going to try to put some more indie games into the mix and maybe do some reviews on them, or some Let's Plays on them. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. And if you like these kind of discussions and you want to hear more of them, listen, I invite you to hit that like button, because really hitting the like button is the only way I know that people actually like this kind of content, that people want to hear more of this kind of content. And hey, you may even want to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, because it is only one push of a button. It means the world to me. You'll get more content like this. And of course, you'll see my weekly uploads for what makes this game great. Anyway, thanks for joining me for this discussion. All right, thank you.